Welcome to this Recovery Movie Meetups video about how films about addiction and recovery can cause those amazing aha moments for your clients in recovery. We'll explore the cultural and anthropological significance of stories, revealing how the three-act structure of films mirrors successful recovery experiences. We'll discuss the power of objective representations of addiction in altering subjective perceptions, emphasizing how films portray the disparity between expectations and outcomes influenced by cognitive biases which are driving addictive behaviors. And we'll use various film examples to demonstrate their ability to trigger introspection and deep self-reevaluation. A great place to start is with the film Inception, directed by Christopher Nolan. If you haven't seen it, Inception is a film where special agents have figured out a way to infiltrate a person's dreams in order to alter what they believe, affect the resulting decisions when awake, and thus profit from it. It's a form of corporate espionage that takes place in somebody's mind. Inception delves into the notion that a single idea, when properly planted and nurtured in somebody's mind, can have far-reaching consequences. The power of this idea lies in its potential to grow and spread, influencing the individual's decisions and ultimately altering the course of their life. The key is that the person comes to believe that the idea is their idea and always was their idea. The central premise of affecting someone's ideas at the core level of their ego is quite similar to what therapists and mutual support meeting facilitators are trying to achieve with clients in recovery every day. Just like the characters in Inception, you are waging a battle within the heavily defended subconscious of your client's mind. You are trying to chip away at a person's elemental and heavily defended conception of themselves. In the film, this is depicted by an impenetrable fortress and a huge safe. The question is, what weapons are you using to infiltrate the subconscious of your client's mind? And this is the central premise of Recovery Movie Meetups. Our meetings use films, which are highly emotional media, to try to affect a person's subjective reality, their core beliefs about themselves, challenge the very essence of how they see themselves, what they really want, and who they truly are. So let's go deeper into that. Recovery Movie Meetups is based on the reconciliation between two realities: the objective reality of the everyday outside what's happening in the universe reality, and the subjective reality of the loop that's playing in an individual's head, their own mental model of what reality is for them within their mind. The objective experience of watching a film can influence a person's subjective experience and emotional response because films have the power to immerse viewers in captivating narratives, relatable characters, and thought-provoking themes. Through visual and auditory stimulation, films engage our senses and trigger emotional reactions. And by presenting stories and ideas in a compelling manner, films can challenge our beliefs, evoke sympathy, and stimulate introspection, and ultimately, they're shaping our thoughts and emotions in profound ways. That is how the objective reality of film influences the subjective reality of our addiction, how we see ourselves, and what our recovery is going to look like. Let's look at an example of how emotions, things that are visual, can trigger profound changes in a person's mind or in an entire society's minds. Iconic photographs like these have the power to galvanize and evoke profound shifts in mass public opinion. The indelible image of Napalm Girl captured during the Vietnam War showed the horrors and innocent victims of war, which stirred a global outcry against the conflict. Similarly, the haunting photograph of a fire hose unleashed on African-American demonstrators in Birmingham during the Civil Rights Movement brought attention to the brutality and injustice of racial segregation, which led to increased support for civil rights causes. Additionally, striking images of a polar bear stranded on melting ice due to climate change served as a visual symbol of the environmental crisis, which prompted widespread awareness and concern for the planet's fragile ecosystem. These photographs, through their emotional impact and visual storytelling, transcended geographical boundaries and cultural barriers, transforming public consciousness and driving a significant shift in society's attitudes and actions. So the point I'm trying to make here is that what a person sees visually affects their emotions, and emotions guide decisions more so than logic. And so it is with a person's perception of their own addiction. The world problems, just like addiction, is a subjective idea. The solution to the problem is to understand that problem as an objective reality. Films allow people to see their addiction as objective representations through film. So let's talk about how addiction deeply affects a person's subjective experience, as it stems from toxic thought patterns and mental modeling that people do. A person's thoughts drives their behaviors, which leads to an objective experience of engaging in addictive behaviors. So let's take a look at the addictive experience from both the subjective and objective point of view. In the subjective experience of addiction, a person has inner monologues. They're doing mental modeling of their problem. They're having what are called thoughts. Will I use today? Will I not use today? I'll quit tomorrow. I won't get into any trouble. My wife or husband will never find out. Those are all subjective mental modelings that addicted individuals are having within the subjective experience of their brains. And then objectively, they act out in the real world through behaviors and choices that they make based on the subjective modeling that's taken place in their brain. So by watching movies about addiction and recovery, we offer an objective perspective by allowing individuals to witness and comprehend the experience of others through film. Engaging in movie meetups facilitates a combination of subjective and objective discussions, where personal reflections merge with shared insights from the films. And this integration of experiences deepens your client's understanding of addiction, and it nurtures meaningful conversations in your group sessions. Because the visual references and emotions and connections that people observe during these movie sessions can really reinforce their subjective understanding of their own addiction, leading to moments of insight and revelation. As your clients witness characters struggling with recovery, they might find hope and inspiration and recognize their own potential to embark on a similar journey towards recovery. Now, before we go deeper and show examples of this, let's talk about movies and what they actually are. What are movies? What are stories? Here we'll try to discuss story structure shortly, because basic story structure of a film is what defines what a story is. And it's the same basic story structure of addiction and recovery. Let's take a look at addiction as history, because addiction and the use of mind-altering chemicals and alcohol has been around for thousands of years. Alcohol, drugs, and their associated cravings, which I guess we can call maladaptive behaviors, addictions, however we want to label those things, they're all really familiar to us, whether we're in active recovery or not. And that's probably because indulging in substances has been part of human history itself for millennia. The process of fermenting alcohol started 13,000 years ago in Georgia, the modern-day country, not the state of Georgia, and went hand in hand with the adoption of agriculture by every civilization since. In fact, the cultivation of grains for alcohol was one of the main motivating factor in civilization as a whole. Do you ever wonder how the Egyptians built the pyramids? Well, part of the reason is that they paid their workers in beer. Let's take a look at addiction as a human story, as part of cultural, as part of narrative, as part of shared collective wisdom, religion, and cultural expression. The Greeks drank alcohol quite a bit and ordained Dionysus their god of wine and ecstasy. The word ecstasy was derived from the Greek word ekstasis, which means standing outside oneself, or a disassociative state, which is kind of ironic when you take into account the fact that disassociatives like ketamine are used today to treat alcohol use disorder. The young students of Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato loved to drink wine after school. And apparently, if we are to believe what has been written, most people partied quite heavily after going to classes with these philosophers. So Naturally, philosophers have posited a question that has vexed civilization ever since then. And that question is, how much is too much? How often is too often? Well, we all know the Romans always had to outdo the Greeks, so they took alcohol to the next level by combining it with violence to create the gladiatorial games and with sex to create the orgy. Their alcohol god, Bacchus, forms the root of the term bacchanalia, and bacchanalia, of course, means drunken revelry. But amidst all the celebrations, philosophers engaged in profound contemplation regarding the role of artificially induced extreme happiness or ecstasy within the human experience. This presented a problem to them. Philosophical schools, including Epicureanism, highlighted the significance of moderation across all aspects of life. Moderation or balance, as they saw it, was the key to happiness. And we still see that today. And as we know, with alcohol and substance abuse, balance is hard to come by. In fact, in a way, addiction is by definition an imbalance. So did alcohol use slow down during the Middle Ages? Well, probably not, because serfs and nobles alike were probably buzzed 24/7 because water contained pathogens that could kill them. So fermenting drinks like wine, mead, and beer were the only safe alternatives for people to stay hydrated. So did this lead to alcohol use disorders? Well, yes and no, because during the Middle Ages, most people's lives were primarily focused on survival, which left them very limited time for indulgences such as alcohol and drugs. If you're basically busy trying to survive, you don't have a lot of time to stay buzzed and being drunk or high most of the time. The emergence of monotheistic religions brought about a shift in attitudes towards indulgence and human excess, rejecting the pursuit of pleasure for its own sake. Major religions frown on excess and pleasure for pleasure's sake due to the fact that there's an emphasis on spiritual growth, which sees material indulgence as a distraction from the pursuit of a higher purpose. Unfortunately, the whole idea of morality and excess, drinking and using drugs, is a legacy that persists today as we grapple with the long-standing belief that addiction is a moral failing. It perpetuates the idea that the pursuit of pleasure is somehow inherently immoral. Now, in movies, addiction isn't a moral failing, it's just a story we tell ourselves and others. It's all relative. It's not absolute. And this can be a calming thing to consider for anyone who's in early recovery and struggling in rehab. So moving into the 20th century, we witness the advent of film as a medium for capturing and portraying stories that have been chronicled through books, poetry, and plays for thousands of years. Movies, without a doubt, are vehicles for storytelling and representations of stories themselves. But what exactly are stories? While we possess an innate understanding of what stories are, describing them precisely can be challenging. Well, notwithstanding that, most people have a fundamentally accurate comprehension of what stories are. They're almost hard-locked into our psyches, almost like instincts. There exist countless unique stories, but at their core, they serve as chronicles of change. Stories are chronicles of change. A story unfolds when a particular situation calls for transformation, and typically, a central hero emerges to navigate the path towards altering the status quo and attaining a desired, often joyous outcome. This essential narrative structure has persisted for thousands of years. It is the essential human story. This leads me to one of my favorite films, and also an important film in terms of the archetype of the central human story of change. The fundamental storyline of Quest for Fire revolves around a group of hunter-gatherers whose survival depends on maintaining fire. When their fire is inadvertently extinguished during a clash with a neighboring tribe, the hunters are faced with venturing into an uncertain world to retrieve the fire, save their community, and restore happiness to the clan. It is an element of survival, like fire has been a very important part of our survival for thousands of years. So while this might seem like a very simple plot, it encapsulates the core essence of storytelling itself, which is the relentless pursuit of something significant, whether it be fire, saving the galaxy, or, in our case, overcoming personal struggles such as addiction. People like movies because movies are like life, and life is full of conflicts. Conflicts are a central aspect of human life. Resolving conflicts requires resilience and sometimes calls for acts of heroism. Now, heroism doesn't necessarily involve donning a cape and saving the world. It can be found in everyday acts of moving forward, bettering oneself, and positively impacting the lives of those around us. And when it comes to addiction, we often encounter this reluctant hero, the person in recovery who grapples with their weakness, which is their addiction. They embark on a journey to overcome this nemesis and transform their lives for the better. This personal transformation not only affects the individual, but has ripple effects reaching far beyond their immediate circle. The decision to improve oneself sets in motion a series of causalities that reverberate throughout the universe, touching the lives of countless others. Movies often follow familiar story archetypes. For instance, Luke Skywalker's story depicts a character trapped in a monotonous existence, guided by someone like Obi-Wan Kenobi, who represents a sponsor or a therapist, let's say. And that person helps Luke tap into his inner strength, which is akin to what they call the Force in this mythology, symbolizing the power for change, willpower, and self-control. And Luke confronts his arch nemesis, Darth Vader, which is a symbol of their personal struggles. This narrative structure highlights the transformative power of overcoming challenges, which extend far beyond a person and impact the interconnected universe. In recovery, a person embarks on a mission to dismantle the Death Star of addiction, restoring harmony in their life. In the same way that Luke Skywalker is relentlessly intentional in blowing up the Death Star and restoring peace to the galaxy, recovery also symbolizes relentless intentionality. However, this is easier said than done, as we all know, because life is filled with complex problems and there's a disconnect between expectation and reality. Intentionality comes up against reality. Prayers and desires may not align with outcomes we receive, making it challenging to reconcile what we think we deserve with what we actually get. Perfection may be an elusive goal, as life inherently falls short of perfection. These dynamics manifest themselves in various aspects of actual life. Thousands of years ago, hunters faced the possibility of becoming prey, highlighting the uncertainties of chance. Farmers were praying for rain, but they might encounter droughts, emphasizing the uncontrollable forces of nature. Corporate politics can lead to unexpected job loss, revealing the lack of control in certain circumstances. Athletes may train diligently, but they still fall short due to the required strength and strategy of a certain competition. And relationships can end abruptly due to the subjective and misunderstood nature of emotions. This disconnect between expectation versus result actually plays out in key addiction triggers in real life. Life may not meet our expectations, leading to frustration and the emergence of triggers. Procrastination arises when work doesn't progress as expected. Reality can be tedious and uninteresting for some people, often due to our own lack of effort in making it engaging. Interactions with people can be disappointing, as they might not always be kind or considerate. Parenting challenges can intensify the risk of addiction relapse. Genetic factors, though the extent of our influence is debatable, they can contribute to addiction susceptibility within families. The desire to be seen as interesting faces the pressure of peer dynamics and the realization that we can't always be the most captivating person in a room. Financial regrets, such as mistimed investments, can add to the burdens of unmet expectations. So when expected result meets undesired outcome, we come to a place that I call the cave, which is the central story of addiction is how to get out of a cave of apathy, delusion, indecision, and self-loathing. Like in olden times, a person would actually sit in a cave in front of a fire, trying to figure out whether they should go outside, risk their life, and try to get some food. And also, like in the film The Whale, a person is trapped in a cave of their own eating disorder and are apathetic and cannot muster the courage to stop their addictive behavior and go outside and engage with the world. So in the context of recovery, before taking action, individuals often find themselves stuck with indecision, apathy, procrastination, denial, delusion, and that leads to an indulgence in their drug of choice. These challenges create difficult situations, and it underscores the complexity of recovery. And addressing them requires acknowledging the struggles between expectations and outcomes, which finding the motivation to overcome this inertia of the cave and confronting the internal conflicts that impede a person's conflict. This is the essential drama of recovery. This brings us to the elemental 3-act structure of most films and stories, in some way, shape, or form, they always follow this basic structure. There is a beginning where somebody is living in a state of inequilibrium with their environment, and that would be addiction. Something is wrong with the world. Then in Act 1, there is an inciting incident. Perhaps a person gets a DUI, or they get arrested, or there's a fight with their loved one, or they just reach a rock bottom. And then there's, well, I should probably do something about this, but then they have second thoughts. Well, no, it's not that bad. And then at the climax of Act 1, the person finally realizes that they can no longer go on the way that they've been going. And so they go into Act 2, which is this special world of recovery. And when they're in that special world, they're encountering obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And perhaps a mentor appears in the form of a sponsor or somebody to help them out to say, it's okay, you can do this. Very much like in Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi came to the help of Luke Skywalker, who was lost. And in the midpoint of the second act, there's a twist. And perhaps in recovery, that would be a point where the person finally realizes that, yes, they do have a problem. Maybe one of their friends dies of a overdose. Maybe they get news from home that they've lost their job. Something happens in the middle of the second act to convince the person that they really do have to double down and take this seriously. And then after that, of course, more obstacles present themselves. The person continues to do recovery. They do the work of recovery. And then perhaps they encounter a disaster or a crisis where they finally come to the end of the rope and they don't want to be in rehab anymore. They don't think they have a problem. Everything that's happened to them in the past was just bad luck. And they decide that they perhaps want to leave rehab, or perhaps they want to take a drink, or perhaps they want to try a drug, or perhaps they want to relapse. And it's that climax of Act 2, which is when something happens to convince the person that, yes, they are addicted to a substance or behavior or alcohol, and that the consequences are very, very real. And at that moment, they decide that they will stick to the plan of seeking out successful recovery and stopping their addictive behaviors. And it's that moment that sometimes it's a religious realization, it's a moment of clarity, it's a moment of deep introspection. Some people call it a spiritual awakening. Whatever it is, it now sets the stage for Act 3, which is when the person has decided to become sober and pursue a life in recovery and feels that they have the strength to do that. And at the very end, there's a wrap-up or an ending. And at the ending of most of these stories, a lot of times in films, there's a talisman, some sort of thing that you get at the exit, a symbol of your success. In Star Wars, it was a trophy. Some people get medallions or AA chips. Whatever it is, it's a physical symbol of the adventure that the person just went on and their successful outcome outside of it as a hero who has vanquished their inner demons. This 3-act structure of a typical story is quite similar to the stages of change model developed by James Prochaska and Carla Di Clemente, which describes the process individuals go through when making significant behavioral changes, such as overcoming addiction. The model consists of 5 stages. The pre-contemplation. In this stage, individuals are not yet aware of or in denial of their problematic behavior, and they have no intention of changing anything and may minimize or ignore the consequences of their action. In contemplation, individuals in this stage recognize the existence of a problem and are contemplating the possibility of change. They weigh the pros and cons, considering the benefits of change and the challenges it presents. In the preparation stage, individuals are committed to making change and actively take a plan to take action. They might seek information, set goals, and explore different strategies to facilitate the desired change. And then they take action. This involves actively trying to modify their behavior and implementing the chosen strategies for change. It requires significant effort and time and dedication to overcome obstacles and sustain the new behavior. And then after that, there's maintenance. People are out of rehab, they're trying to live normal lives, and once individuals have successfully made the desired changes, they enter this stage of maintenance. The basic story structure of a film, just like the stages of change, is quite similar to what psychologists also call the 5 stages of grief, applied for people with terminal diseases. The stages of grief are similar to the journey of addiction recovery, and they provide a very interesting framework for understanding the emotional process that individuals go through when faced with a significant challenge. These are denial, anger, bargaining, and depression as the most common reactions before reaching a final acceptance of what is. Just like being stuck in a cave, the stages of change model and the stages of grief represents a state of indecision and struggle against insurmountable odds. However, acceptance plays a crucial role in facilitating positive outcomes. It involves acknowledging the reality of the addiction and embracing the need for change. While the stages of grief are applicable in situations like terminal cancer, in addiction, acceptance is also very important, and it leads to the possibility of finding peace and a path towards successful recovery. The Recovery Movie Meetups program delves into the parallels between movies and real life, and we're highlighting that addiction is a quintessential human story. And there's a lot to be learned from these stories. So in movies, a common conflict is the fight or flight dilemma, where individuals may choose to escape reality or confront it. You can either stay in the cave or leave the cave. Similarly, addiction creates a delusion where one can deny the problem and continue living in a constructed world. This can be likened to the addiction matrix. But by facing the problem head-on, individuals can take the red pill and embrace the reality of recovery, or they can take the blue pill and stay exactly where they are in their addiction. The main point here is that there are no shortcuts or easy solutions. Decisions must be made, and recovery requires a commitment to change. So, just like in the Matrix, where there is no free lunch, individuals must take responsibility for their own recovery journey. This key scene from the Matrix serves as a metaphor for successful recovery, emphasizing the assumption of internal power to transform oneself. Let's see how Neo deals with this question.
Mr. Anderson.
Run, Neo, run. What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
So yes, while Neo's decision in the Matrix seems logical and rational, we all know that people are not always rational, especially not when it comes to addiction and recovery. People in recovery think that this time will be different for them, that the laws of chance don't apply to them, that they're somehow lucky. Their situation is different from those people next to them at the rehab facilities. They think that the laws of cause and effect will be magically suspended for them because they're special. And this really involves fundamental cognitive biases like attribution error, affinity bias, hindsight bias, self-serving bias, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and the availability heuristic. All of these cognitive biases conspire to make people think that they're special and somehow immune from big decisions like recovery. They are irrational, in other words. So as we know, in the rehab experience, clients are not necessarily special. They do belong there. That's why they're in rehab. And despite the belief that people are unbiased, everybody is susceptible to biases throughout the day. And it's crucial to recognize that people are not special when it comes to addiction. Denying this reality only hinders their progress. So movies like 28 Days in Clean and Sober emphasize this point, showcasing characters who initially believe that they are different from others in rehab. And these films then teach us that we must create our own reality and acknowledge that we are just like everybody else facing the same problem. And once we accept this, we can approach our recovery with intentionality and determination. Taking action and doing the necessary work of recovery becomes essential. Part of the challenge here is what philosophers sometimes call the tyranny of free will. And it's the challenge that lies in the concept of free will itself, in that life is full of choices and selecting the right attitude can be particularly difficult. Individuals never have access to perfect information, and biases and prejudices often blind them to the truth. Moreover, the notion of absolute truth is subjective and elusive anyway. So on the road to recovery, people must make rational choices based on the available information and strive to minimize their biases. While perfect objectivity might be unattainable, Focusing on making more rational decisions can contribute to a successful journey towards recovery. But again, when it comes to making choices, things might seem rationally straightforward enough, but emotionally not so much. One particularly interesting film we discuss in the Recovery Movie Meetups program is Another Round, which won the Best International Film category at the Oscars a couple of years ago. The premise of the film revolves around 4 friends who embark on an experiment to maintain a blood alcohol level of 0.08 throughout the day, which is just slightly buzzed and short of illegal. While the idea might seem rational on the surface, the emotional aspect of decision-making plays a significant role here. Even when individuals engage in a cost-benefit analysis regarding drinking or sobriety, their emotional state often overrides rationality. So in the film, each character evaluates the impact of the experiment on their lives. Initially, they experience certain benefits, such as the main character, played by Mads Mikkelsen, becoming an engaging history teacher whose students excel academically. However, as the experiment progresses and the characters push the limits, the negative effects of alcohol become apparent, albeit at various levels of severity for each character. This film showcases the importance of considering the cost-benefit analysis of substance use and its potential consequences. And it leads to a very interesting question. Another Round raises an intriguing thought experiment. What if there was a pill that could keep individuals at a blood alcohol level of 0.05 throughout the day without needing to consume alcohol? Think about this. This poses an existential question and the perceived benefits of being slightly buzzed and the meaning of life in sobriety. While some might believe that being slightly intoxicated enhances the quality of their life, individuals in recovery understand the meaningfulness and significance of a drug-free and alcohol-free existence. So by using this thought experiment and the movie Another Round in the Recovery Movie Meetups program, it forces an individual to contemplate the complex relationship between substance use, rationality, emotions, and the search for life fulfillment. In the Recovery Movie Meetups program, we do definitely include films about the consequences of drug and alcohol use. And in these films, we try to make the point that there is a realization that there is no free pass and that addiction will almost invariably lead to negative outcomes. And by seeing films with these kinds of representations of negative consequences, it gives individuals the ability to see highly negative consequences in characters on film as a gut check on the individual's own situation. And at the end of the day, that's understanding that the end result of addiction is entirely under the control of the individual. People often strive for perfection, and the pursuit of perfection can become a justification for relapse or going back to old habits. However, the truth is that perfection is unattainable, and this realization can be a necessary first step towards successful recovery. Films like Black Swan and Whiplash, which are covered in the Recovery Movie Meetups program, explore the destructive nature of an addiction to perfection. These stories depict how individuals can literally be destroyed by their obsession with perfection. But recovery, on the other hand, involves unconditional self-acceptance, acknowledging that no one, including ourselves, is perfect. It's important to recognize that others will never be perfect either. Embracing this understanding allows people to navigate through their imperfections without being paralyzed by them. Additionally, practicing unconditional life acceptance fosters gratitude for what people do have in their lives, shifting their focus from what is lacking to what they do have. This concept aligns with mindfulness in various forms and can greatly benefit individuals on their recovery journey. Certainly, success can become an addiction, and films have explored this theme in various ways. There are stories of successful individuals, including movie stars and supermodels, who seemingly have everything but still struggle with addictive behaviors. The irony lies in the fact that their achievements and fame do not provide them with the fulfillment that they seek, leading them to make destructive choices that can ruin their lives. Moreover, in the pursuit of success in any endeavor, individuals may find themselves caught in an endless cycle. Even when they achieve success, there's always something that's unattainable, success plus one, waiting for them. This constant striving and the desire for more can lead to dissatisfaction and a sense of never truly reaching a satisfying endpoint. Ultimately, these films shed light on the dark side of success and the inherent dangers of tying one's self-worth solely to external achievements. They highlight the importance of finding fulfillment and contentment within oneself rather than relying on external validation and the pursuit of never-ending success. In Recovery Movie Meetups meetings, you'll also explore the dynamics of addiction within relationships, highlighting the impact it has on couples and families. One such example is the film When a Man Loves a Woman, where a husband, played by Andy Garcia, discovers that his wife, portrayed by Meg Ryan, has been struggling with alcohol use disorder. As the story unfolds, he realizes his own role in the situation and acknowledges that he too has to change. This movie emphasizes the idea that addiction is not an isolated problem, but rather a collective struggle that requires understanding, support, and behavioral modifications from all the parties. Another significant film that tackled the topic of addiction within relationships is Days of Wine and Roses, starring Jack Lemmon and Lee Remick. Released at a time when alcohol use disorder, or so-called alcoholism, was gaining recognition as a serious problem, the film served as an important vehicle to raise awareness about the impact of addiction on couples and families. Recovery Movie Meetups also covers the family experience of addiction. One such film is 4 Good Days, based on a true story, which depicts a mother who has witnessed her daughter go through 17 rehab attempts. The story highlights the struggles faced by many parents who must grapple with the dilemma of supporting their loved ones while also confronting the harsh reality of past disappointments and broken trust. It delves into the question of whether this time will be different and explores the profound emotions and challenges that arise when navigating a loved one's addiction. Beautiful Boy portrays the story of a talented young man from a privileged background who becomes addicted to methamphetamine. The movie explores how addiction can distort one's perceptions of reality, making even a seemingly perfect life appear to be insufficient. Films like Trainspotting also delve into the notion that addiction can make life seem meaningless without the substance, creating a skewed perspective on reality.